Show Warriors, episode 495. Woo! As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by viable human Chris Saturn.
Hi, Justin.
Hi, Saturn.
I
Go ahead. No, you.
I don't know if we normally mention all of our production-y stuff during our pre-show instead of during the show.
True, yeah.
But I just noticed that my waveform slightly picks up your voice when you talk.
Oh.
Just barely though, and I'm sure it gets edited out during all of our compression and everything. But...
I do the editing, and I hope it does, but I don't know. is your headphones turned up a little high, maybe? Or...
No, it's the same as it always is. It's just
now I'm just gonna be nervous the whole episode.
And I'm pretty sure it always gets picked up slightly, so it's I'm sure it is a thing that has always happened, but it's just I never noticed it until just now.
Oh, well, that's just kind of a scary thing to notice right in the middle of starting the show after a half-hour pre-show, isn't it?
Yeah, I just thought I would leave that with you. So enjoy that, Justin.
Great. I'm not going to be anxious because you know that I edit the uncuts now, right? Like that's I don't know how to do it. I've been learning how to edit. I mean, granted, we don't do much editing because they're uncuts, but I have to figure out how to make it not sound like trash garbage, and it's been very difficult.
The good news is that the people who are going to be the most understanding and forgiving are the people who subscribe to the uncuts.
Right, but also the people who will be most affected are the ones that give us money.
Yeah. That's congratulations.
Thanks, guinea pigs.
Thanks for the money. Enjoy
Look,
this.
man, if Ubisoft can sell $70 beta tests, okay, then we can do our thing. It's fine.
It's fine. It's totally fine.
It's all fine. My week, I've been playing lots of games. So many games. The Steam Winter Sale happened, and I did that thing where you go and you're like, oh, I'll go find, I'll go spend $20-$30 and find, 3 or 4 or 5 games that I've been, kind of eyeballing.
Yeah, get all the games.
Yeah, and so you'll do that, and you'll buy 3 or 4 or 5 games, and then a couple days later, you'll do it again, and I did 4 rounds of that and bought 20 games for $80.
Yeah.
Because that's how it works. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And so, I have finally started taking a real crack at Darkest Dungeon, a game that people keep saying that I would probably really enjoy, and that I have kind of eschewed because it's very depressing.
It is.
And
pretty bleak.
I
have heard that it is almost bleak to the point of parody, though.
I don't feel that.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't feel like bleak to the point of parody is like the opening of Monty Python and the Holy Grail to me, where people
that's just straight up parody. That's
living in shit and wallowing, farming shit and being covered in shit.
That is a parody of bleakness, not bleak to the point of parody. That's the other end of the spectrum.
Well, either way, it doesn't feel like, none of it is like, ha ha ha. It's people like, oh, I've now developed a severe mental disorder and I need to go to the asylum to get it fixed. And if I don't, I'm just going to go get drunk and scream about it. And I'm like, that doesn't feel funny. I'm not like, ha ha ha. That's not funny to me. So I don't know.
It's a sign that you're not a psychopath, actually.
I guess.
Yeah.
But I have been taking kind of a more of a real crack at it and really enjoying the systems in that game. It's a little bit to learn. It's a lot of bit to learn, actually. Yeah. And once you get rolling on it, it's pretty good. Nice. I like the kind of positionality element of the combat, how it's very much like the character's positioning in the party.
Yeah.
I still don't love how you go back to town and it's just like, welcome to Dirt Town where we all have diseases and we're dying and it's horrible. I wish somewhere there was a little bit of brightness, just literally anywhere.
A slight glimmer of hope in the middle.
Yeah, just one shack with a unicorn in it that I could go pet or something. What
if it was half a unicorn?
Which half?
The ass half.
Well, how do we know it's a unicorn? We'd have no idea.
It has a tattoo on the back of it that says, "I was once a unicorn."
But Saturn, anyone can get that tattoo.
Oh shit.
But I've been enjoying it. I
guess if it was the ass half of a monkey and it said that, you wouldn't believe it though.
This is true. That would be a monkey corn.
Oh, right.
What that would be. Although corn isn't the part that implies one. So it'd be una monkey corn.
My least favorite Halloween candy is monkey corn.
Yeah, I can't. I like the monkey pumpkins. Those are better than the monkey corns. I also picked up and have been playing Cult of the Lamb.
Oh, nice.
Which is really fun.
That's been on my radar for a while.
Oh man, it's real fun. It's like if Harvest Moon and Animal Crossing had a satanic baby that wanted to kill demons. Is what it feels like. So it's pretty much like half. I don't want to say lifestyle game. It really more like colony management, like light colony management paired up with light accessible roguelite gameplay.
Yeah, I previously heard it described as a slightly more casual blend of Black and White and Binding of Isaac.
Black and White I don't see really like even Black and White is more involved. The colony management is here is like build them outhouses so they got somewhere to poop, and then like basically you eventually automate everything. Like they're pooping, cleaning up their own poop, they're using the poop to fertilize the farms that they're then watering and then growing and then eating,
or
like
cookies.
Yeah, and it basically turns in you, but the getting to play the dungeon side, but the dungeon side is very Binding of Isaac-esque. Everything's like a screen at a time if you're into that kind of thing. And it's real fun. It's got now I bought the bundle with like all of the expansions. It was like $25 or $30. So I don't know what isn't expansion content. So just to put that out there, for all I know, the base game is like super barren. I have no idea. But I've been playing it multiplayer with my daughter, and she can. It's just got drop in, drop out co-op.
Yeah.
And the co-op player can do everything the main player can. And she can pop in, play a couple rounds with me. It's got accessibility options that I can turn on infinite HP.
Nice.
So she can jump in, play, we build our cult up, we sacrifice some people to demons and like drink their blood or whatever. And then we go cook a bunch of meals for everybody. And it's all super cute, but also really satanic. And I really enjoy that pairing
Wholesome family entertainment
of like extremely satanic, but also really cute. And my daughter likes it too, so we've been playing that together and having a good time with it, and just really fun. I was kind of surprised. I sort of expected it to be more roguelite than colony management, but it really is kind of half and half. Sometimes a whole play session, I'll just be in my colony running around, building buildings and doing sermons and talking to my little cult members and just kind of managing them and not even really bother going to the dungeon.
Nice.
And then other times I'll just sit there and do 3 or 4 dungeon runs and then go, all right, I'm good, I'm done. So very, very good, very accessible, very fun.
I've always been a big fan of those half and half games ever since ActRaiser.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's if you like the half and half games, ActRaiser is probably a pretty good comparison, even though the two
it's
halves
different genres.
Yeah, it's different genres. The two but just sort of experience-wise, it feels similar to ActRaiser and how it's kind of cut up, right? I also picked up Mini Shoot Adventures on your recommendation, broadly to the chat. Really fun.
Oh, it's so good.
Man, it breaks my heart that Sega didn't make this a Fantasy Zone game. Just breaks my heart. It's a 2-person team. It's really good, man.
Yeah, they
it's
did
like
a phenomenal job.
It's like a top-down twin stick
Zelda game.
Zelda shmup.
Yeah, and the amount of love and references to the first Zelda specifically are great. Like if you go down one screen from your town, it is the first screen from the first Zelda game.
It's exact. It's really cute. It's really fun. It was a few bucks, and it's I've been having a lot of blast with that one, and surprisingly difficult. There are moments where I'm like, man, that's just it got tough.
It does ramp up pretty hard. I managed to get through the entire game without turning on the accessibility or dropping to the easier difficulty. But the post game, it unlocks a little arena that you can do stuff at, and that feels basically impossible to me. It is ludicrous bullet hell at that point.
Which for post game, hard to be too upset about it.
Yeah,
but
whatever.
Still,
it's fine.
We talked about it on the pre-show and the pre-show. I've picked up Cookie Clicker for $1. I've been getting back into Cookie Clicker,
and then you picked it up for me. So
and then I bought it for you. So, and I can neither confirm nor deny that it's running on one of my monitors right now.
I've got it minimized at the moment,
but it's Cookie Clicker's fun.
Yeah.
Also, I had everyone over. I had you, Pablo, Andrew, Guy, over for our Retro Warriors Christmas, and I got to play a bunch of couch co-op stuff.
Yes.
We played Doom 1 and 2. We played Nidhogg 2, which was pretty fun. We did Stick Fight, which was surprisingly fun.
Yeah, we spent a good amount of time on Stick Fight.
Yeah.
It took a while for that one to get old, too.
You weren't here for it, but we played Duck Game, which is very much like slightly more content Stick Fight. It's kind of the same idea, though, where it's just you just are dropped into arenas and you fight each other.
Nice.
And so what I've done is my laptop has now become my main desk computer, and I have a Thunderbolt dock here, and my desktop has now become my living room media computer. And so I was like, well, I want to set this up to be kind of couch co-op, so I can play stuff when people are over, or play stuff with my daughter or whatever. And that was kind of my litmus test, was put a bunch of couch co-op games on there, and whenever y'all come over, we'll play a bunch of stuff. And outside of some sort of PC controller weirdness, which always occurs, it worked pretty good with Steam and big picture mode. So
yeah, it seemed to work just fine.
I've also, I guess I'm gonna have to move it to this week because you're gonna mention Animal Well.
Yes.
And I've also been playing Animal Well. But I'm gonna let you take that away because I just don't have much to say about it. It's not bad. I'm not enjoying it, but I'm not like indie game of the year enjoying it, which I think a lot of people, it got a lot of praise. Like people were like really
I think
insanely
I might have to,
positive on this game.
I might have to retroactively add it to one of my top games of 2024.
Really? Okay.
I have already played through it 3 times now.
Okay.
It is incredibly good. It didn't even occur to me until after the first time I had finished the game that there's no combat. And that might be one of the things.
None.
That might be one of the things that really I appreciated about it. Like it didn't even occur to me that I wasn't fighting any of the things that I encountered. But yeah, there's no combat whatsoever. It is the thing that I really dig on it is it's one of those games that just makes you feel like you're a genius when you figure something out.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept having those moments where I was like, I think I just cheated this and found a cheat way to get through this, and then I would get 2 screens in and realize that's exactly what I was supposed to have done. And I'm a big fan of that kind of gameplay where it doesn't hand you the answer at any time, and you just kind of fumble your way into it, and you're like, I think I just cheated my way through that, but that was the intended solution. There were a few things that I did the unintended solution, but the game allows you to do those unintended solutions, and in some circumstances they actually prepared for the unintended solution by giving you an unintended path to keep going.
I have kind of the opposite reaction to that. Whenever whenever I think I broke it, and then the next screen reveals that you didn't break it, you idiot. We knew exactly what you were going to do. It makes, and I don't like that. Because I like the feeling that I broke it and actually broke it. But then whenever I'm deflated to learn, they're like, no, you dummy, we're not that stupid. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, sure, yeah. I thought I was smart, but I guess no, you're right. Like that's I kind of.
I'm a big fan of that because it makes me. That's the kind of learning in a game I want. That's the way I want the game to teach me.
I do like learning stuff that way, but then when I'm when it's immediately obvious that like you're not smart. We wanted you to figure that out, and it still took you half an hour. I'm like, oh.
Granted, there are a handful of puzzles, especially near the end when I was going towards all the more obscure hidden shit. Mm-hmm. That when I did it, I was like, I don't know how they expected any human being to get that. And then there's one puzzle when you're going for like the good endings that literally requires 50 people to work together to get to the solution to the puzzle. So there's no way I could have figured that out without looking it up online. Because not only does it require literally 50 people, but it requires 50 people to have been given a different puzzle piece to it. And you might end up with 3 people in a row that get the same puzzle piece, and that doesn't help you at all. So it was neat there. And then the final thing to find in the game, which there's no way I could have figured this out, but when you do figure it out, the guy recorded his own voice in the game. The developer recorded his voice saying, I thought this would take years and no one would ever actually figure this out, but it has been figured out. So at least he acknowledged that there is no way a human being should have been able to accomplish that. But I do appreciate that level of just weird, obscure, hidden puzzles in a game, and it did scratch all that itch for me.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I don't know. I'm not a search action fan to begin with.
Yeah, I think that's the thing.
For someone who's not really a fan of
that
that genre, to be enjoying it in the first place probably says something. And I do like the atmosphere and the visuals a lot.
Yeah.
I keep getting stuck real hard, though. Like, I'm on some kind of weird multi-level conveyor belt shit right now that is just, like, inverting my brain.
I managed to get to the base ending without looking anything up, and that felt nice. I was not expecting that.
Yeah.
So there's that. I will say my appreciation of Animal Well was what got me searching for some other search action game, and that's how I found Mini Shoot Adventures. Was because it was on a list of some of the best search action of 2024 that you hadn't heard of list.
Yeah.
And so I'd picked it up, and I don't know that I would consider it a search action. It feels more Zelda-like to me than it does.
I have said before, I said it in the chat the other day, that I lump Zelda in with search actions.
Yeah, and that could be perfectly fair. And sometimes
I know the difference
that is
for
the
you
case.
is platforming, right?
Right,
Search
exactly,
action are very platforming. For me, it's searching and action. Like, the platforming can be there or not be there. That doesn't define the genre for me.
It's fair.
But I also think saying that no search action as platforming is equally as valid.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. For me, that is one of those things that makes it feel like that to me.
Yeah,
I don't get the same feel out of a non-platforming search action game. But there are a couple of moments in Mini Shoot that almost feel like platforming when you're jumping across little platforms.
Yeah, there is, especially after you get the ability to, like, boost across gaps.
Exactly.
Like, you're not really vertically platforming, but it gameplay wise is effectively the same.
Yeah, it does almost scratch that same itch. So I can definitely see how that would lump in there.
Yeah.
But I still just greatly enjoyed Mini Shoot Adventures. Oh, so good. I might have to replay that again soon.
Yeah. I think of all because I've been playing, 30 games simultaneously because, I got time, right?
Right.
I think Cult of the Lamb is the one I've put the most time. Well, I mean, actual clocked hours is Cookie Clicker, but that's because you leave it open. But Cult of the Lamb is like most hours out of everything mentioned that I've actually been sitting down actively playing.
Nice.
So Mini Shoot and Animal Well's probably second
Nice.
most. But yeah. Let's do some news.
All right.
Also, we didn't mention this is our first episode recorded in 2025.
That's true. Yeah.
So our first news segment of 2025.
As of this recording, it is the second. Granted, a lot of this news is still from last year.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. Because we're slow.
Yep.
Shuji Utsumi, the CEO of Sega America and Europe, says they're not making a Saturn or Dreamcast mini console because, and this is a quote from, again, Shuji Utsumi, the CEO of Sega America and Europe.
Yeah.
Quote, "We are not a retro company." And I thought, surely this was taken out of context and just used to make sensational headlines.
No.
And they followed it up with, like, "We're not a retro company. We're always looking forward to new projects." And I'm like, your new projects, like the new forthcoming stuff in the Crazy Taxi and Golden Axe franchises that you recently announced?
Yeah.
Or Sonic Mania or Sonic Plus or the Sega Genesis collections or the Genesis Mini 1 and 2.
Yeah.
What the fuck are you talking about?
My guess is that this guy specifically, the Western head of Sega,
yes,
he seems to really be emphasizing their more modern stuff. And you have noticed a lot of their ads are really aiming towards stuff like a Dragon, stuff like Metaphor Refantasio.
I'm sorry, Like a Dragon, the game that features a huge amount of playable retro video games in it. Is that the one you're talking about?
That's the one, yeah.
Metaphor Refantasio, the game that's made by the team that makes Persona, which is in the Shin Megami Tensei series, which is one of the longest running RPG franchises of all time. That one?
Yeah, that one.
Okay, yeah. All that extreme, forward-looking, not legacy worshipping modern stuff. Yeah, okay.
Right.
Oh,
definitely.
I knocked my recording device on the floor.
Again, yeah.
Again.
You just keep table flipping it tonight. I don't know.
Sorry. I hope it's fine. It's probably fine. It's probably fine.
The next time you do that, just pull a coffee talk and do the whole talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah, there you go. Worst case scenario, I just ruined my whole recording.
Yeah,
and we're going to get to the end of the episode and realize we have to do it over again.
Fortunately, you sound fine.
You don't hear me through the recording device.
Oh.
Only the listeners do.
Oh, right. You have it split somehow.
I do.
Hmm.
I do. Anyway, hopefully it's fine.
It's
Hopefully
probably fine.
I'm not going to worry about it. We're not worried. We're going to keep moving. Sega is considering a Netflix-like subscription service for their games.
Probably only their new games, since they're not a retro company.
I don't. Why? Just sell us the fucking games. Are you not selling enough games? Is that what's happening?
Well, they're also selling the games, but they also want to do a Netflix-like service for them.
I don't know. So here's my issue. I'm not opposed to
everyone wants a subscription all the time now?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to the idea of being like, hey, if you buy all of our shit anyway, and you're the kind of person that like you play through a game one time and then you move on and then you never go back to it and you don't care about having a library or owning the things you purchase, then you can subscribe to EA Play or Ubisoft Connect or whatever. My issue is that we've seen what being subscription first has done to things like
industry.
The film industry, but also things like first-party Microsoft titles. The way they're developing games and releasing games is changing around this subscription model.
True. Yeah.
And I don't know that it is healthy, and I don't know that it is for the good of the industry. I think it's for the good of the subscription model.
Now, that said, we're still pretty young in the development of Game Pass.
True.
It's only been around for a few years now, and it's only really taken off for Microsoft in the last 5 years or so. This coming year supposedly has a handful of big first-party titles for Microsoft. You got Avowed, and you got Fable, and you got that new Doom, and presumably a new Call of Duty, because why not?
Right.
I am curious to see how those pan out in the subscription
I am
model.
as well. Yeah, like I'm not ready to throw in the towel and be like, it's ruining everything, but stuff like Halo Infinite, and the most recent Forza definitely feel different than I think they would have felt if they were just discrete games that you just had to buy and that was the only way to get them.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
Falcom and Refint.
This is a new publisher that I've never heard of before.
Refint/Games have announced a surprise international release of the 2010 PSP game Ys vs. Trails in the Sky Alternative Saga. The game will be released on PS5, PS4, Switch, and PC this year. Saturn, you like both of those?
I do. I am curious about this. I played a little bit of the PSP version after it was fan translated, and in fact, the fan translators, the Geofront, who also did the fan translations of Trails from Zero and Trails to Azure, that NIS America had paid them to use their fan translation in those games. Well, they were also paid to use their fan translation in this release. So this fan translation team is getting plenty of proper work all of a sudden. That's very exciting.
That is very exciting. It's nice to see. I mean, Falcom's been pretty good about using fan efforts in the past anyway. So, but it's nice to see still.
But I did play a little bit of this when the fan translation was released. It's a neat, almost fighting game.
I was going to say, is it an Ys game or a Trails in the Sky game? Like, is it a traditional RPG or is it an action RPG?
It plays kind of like a Ys game if it were a multiplayer fighting game.
Okay.
Which is neat and weird.
All right, then.
Yeah.
Ship of Hyrcanian team has released their Star Fox 64 decompilation. These are the people that famously did the Ocarina of Time decompilation, have been maintaining that project. And I think they're also doing the Majora one, aren't they? That's them. Yep. I keep saying how much I love seeing these N64 games need this kind of treatment the worst.
Yeah.
And so I'm always happy to see it. And Star Fox 64 is really fun. And I'm really excited to get to play it in full PC glory. So that's going to be a good thing. A fully playable Wii build of Star Wars Battlefront 3 has leaked online. This is the original Battlefront series, not the remake Battlefront series that was still called Battlefront. But cool, fully playable. That's exciting. I like the Battlefront games. I think they're fun, kind of casual third-person shooter games. I enjoy them. So more is better.
Yep.
Sega and My Arcade have announced their new mini arcade cabinets. But hold on, Sega's not a retro company, so I don't quite know. The weird thing is,
leaked through somehow.
These feature Genesis ports of Sega arcade games, but I guess they're modern Sega arcade games or something, because Sega's not a retro company. Saturn.
Well, Genesis is still modern, Justin.
Oh, is that it? It's because they still sell it at Bed Bath & Beyond?
Because
they never quit fucking selling the Genesis.
So it's still technically modern.
The GOG arm of CD Projekt has announced layoffs as they struggle to continue to be profitable. This isn't the first time they've had layoffs. There have been other rounds of layoffs. It's
tragic news because GOG is such a great service.
Looking into it, this doesn't seem... Because sometimes when you hear about layoffs at a company, it's like, oh, this is a nail in a coffin somewhere.
Right.
Other times it just seems like, no, this is just a company that kind of goes through this process every few years, and they seem like the latter, which doesn't make it feel any better.
Right.
But it does kind of, stave off any immediate alarmist feelings. Plus, it's not like they're not going to make all the money in the world with The Witcher 4, which was just revealed at the Keeleys. So, it's just one of those things. It's still unfortunate for those people.
Yeah.
That it's not something, I don't know. It sucks.
Right.
And I don't have a lot of trust for CD Projekt Red as a company after all of the cyberpunk shit. So my immediate knee-jerk reaction is to be like, fuck you guys, to be honest.
Well, CD Projekt Red is a separate division than GOG. They both are under CD Projekt, but they are not run the same.
Right, but there's
there's still corporate bleed over.
The higher ups, right? The higher corporate structure is there's bleed over. I can't believe that there's not bleed over.
Oh yeah.
Still unfortunate to see. NHK TV has broadcast a rare interview with Nasir Gabelli. I haven't seen this. I don't know if it's actually watchable yet. I keep meaning to sit down and watch it, but
yeah, I'm hoping that it's gotten a English translation.
If not a YouTube auto translation or something.
Yeah, it was broadcast on NHK in Japan on the 30th of December, so just a couple days ago as of our recording. And it's scheduled to rebroadcast tomorrow, or I guess today, Japan time, as of recording.
And I don't know if this is just my perception or not, but I feel like there is not much in the way of interview material with Nasir Gabelli, who was extremely influential in the RPG space in
early
the
Squaresoft.
90s.
And now he has been relatively reclusive as far as interviews go. He did a couple of interviews. Usually when he does interviews, it's with fellow game developers. That seems to be the people he is willing to open up with. Yeah. So I am curious to see how this interview goes. I'm curious if there's any insight into the development of those early Final Fantasy games and the early Mana games and other stuff that he worked on.
Yeah. Finally, a fairly accurate CRT electron beam simulator has been released as a GPU shader for 240 Hz LCD and OLED screens, though it would optimally require a 1000 Hz screen for full accuracy.
It does look really good from what they've shown.
This is the nichest of the niche.
Yeah.
This is like high-end boutique niche, hardcore.
Said, as screens with higher refresh rates become more prevalent, which may or may not happen, we don't know the direction that screens are going to go. We never do. They didn't go 3D like everybody.
I was going to say the industry
to.
Doesn't know where they're going to go. Look at 3D TVs; they have no fucking idea what's
exactly. But if they do go that direction and we end up with more higher refresh rate screens in the future, this is a great sign for emulation because
absolutely
this will make emulating a CRT screen significantly easier and more consistent.
And something you can do at a hardware level without having to fuss with shaders and scalers and stuff like that.
Granted, this is a shader, so...
But you
won't have to do it at the emulator level.
In the software, I mean. I'm speaking as someone who was fighting with DOSBox shaders today.
Right. No,
and I'm like, have something high level outside of the software that I can do that's not me fighting with this shit will be very nice.
And it'll make it consistent across all of your emulators as well.
Yes.
So that's nice.
Which brings us to our topic at hand, which I'm very excited about. It is Learning to Love Roguelikes. This is our second entry in our Learning to Love series, both of them by me, because I just want to be excited and talk about a thing that's exciting to me.
Justin just wants to love things. That's all.
I just want to love.
Give him somebody to love.
I know that people think all I do is sit around and bitch and hate on things, but there's a lot of stuff that I love out there, like hating on things. I love doing that.
And bitching.
I love those things. For synopsis, we have What If Your Video Game Also Hated You? Which felt the most appropriate. For people that didn't listen to our Learning to Love Monster Hunter series, which I think I did with Andrew, you were not available that night. I think you had COVID or something. You were sick.
I had the COVIDs. I had the Ronas.
And so this is basically where one of us shows up and says, hey, I really love this thing. No one else on staff really seems to, but I really do, and I want to talk about it. So I'm just going to talk about it for the remainder of the show. And so we are doing roguelikes this go around. As far as first encounters, I don't know that I ever really played a proper roguelike before NetHack. Now, granted, I didn't play NetHack a million billion years ago when it came out. I played it when I was learning programming in the probably in the 2010s, early 2010s, maybe late aughts, when I was really getting into Linux and compiling all my own software, and I was going to school for engineering, and in these like C programming circles, NetHack kind of is kicked around a lot. You know, a lot of people will for a while, a lot of Linux distributions came with NetHack.
Yep.
And so it was just kind of this omnipresent game where I'm like, oh, I'm sitting here on this Gentoo installation, you know, emerging a ports tree or whatever I got fucking going on. And I don't have a graphical interface I can play around with, but I can do NetHack.
Yeah.
And so that was where I started with roguelikes. And it went on to me and a friend starting projects to program our own roguelikes, which never really went anywhere fruitful or meaningful. But it was something that kind of exploded into my life out of necessity, which is I'm in non-graphical environments
stuck in
a
a
lot.
command line environment.
Yeah,
so.
What can I do here?
Yeah.
And so I ended up playing a lot of NetHack and then Roguelites with a T, which we'll get into the difference shortly, really started taking off. And that sort of had a feedback into the proper genre of roguelikes.
Yeah.
And so, kind of the rest is history, and I've just sort of enjoyed them off and on since then.
Now, I have a question before I even mention my
sure
with the genre. Is do we consider classic arcade games to be roguelike? Because they do effectively make you restart from the beginning every time.
I'll tell you what.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go over my general definition of both of these, and then we'll loop back to see if you want to pinpoint where you think your first experience is.
Okay.
So let's talk genre definitions, because really this episode has to be about two genres, which is roguelikes with a K and roguelites with a T.
Yes.
They're very similar genres, and I'm going to try to break down the differences. And now, like all video game genres, genre designations are stupid and nonsensical.
Yes.
They don't make any sense. They're called roguelikes because they're similar to what is considered to be the first, if not one of the first, in this genre, which was the game Rogue.
Yeah.
Which is what all of these are kind of, in a way.
They are like that.
Yeah, they are like that. They are like Rogue. And this is what genres used to be called for a while. It's like, oh, they're Doom clones. They're roguelikes. As far as definition, roguelikes are considered to be turn-based RPGs with procedurally generated levels in which character death is permanent.
Mm-hmm.
That is my high level. It has to have these things to be and so I'm going to start using two different terms because roguelite and roguelike sound so similar. Yeah. And when I say them without really enunciating, then it's easy to mix them up. So I'm going to call roguelikes traditional roguelikes, which is also what Steam calls them, which can help. Because if you just search roguelike, you're going to get all kinds of fucking crazy shit. But if you search traditional roguelike, you're going to get these. So again, turn-based RPGs with procedurally generated levels in which character death is permanent. They are usually grid-based, which imparts an element of spatial strategy. So they are not turn-based in that they have menus like a JRPG. They are, they're not menu-driven combat. It's on a grid.
Right.
They are often considered to be particularly difficult games. They, and while not a genre designation, most of the celebrated old school roguelikes are often free and or open source. This was kind of a big thing in the genre. A lot of new roguelikes coming out today are still free and open source. Big time examples in the traditional roguelike genre include Rogue, NetHack, Angband, more recently Caves of Cud, Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup. I have Caves of Cud in here twice. I guess I was really thinking about Caves of Cud a lot. Jupiter Hell. I would throw in Tangled Deep, Tales of Maj'Al, Adam with a D, ADOM. There's a lot of both old and new entries in this.
I think you forgot Caves of Cud.
Caves of Cud, traditional roguelike. Roguelites share many of the same trappings, but they change up a few things. So death is permanent for your character, but there is a large meta progression that can be moved forward, and that meta progression is permanent. So I guess in that way, Tangle Deep would not be considered a traditional roguelike. I've already gotten my own genres mixed up. They are often real-time, action-oriented games instead of turn-based affairs on a grid. And they often share a lot of DNA with Souls-likes, or rather the reverse, but don't tell that to Souls-like fans because they'll get upset with you.
Yeah, they do get upset easily.
And they're also really frequently mashed up with other genres. So at the high level, roguelite, with the capital R, stuff like Hades, Dead Cells, Risk of Rain 2, Binding of Isaac, lots of stuff in this roguelite genre. Tangle Deep, which I've already reclassified. But then there are lots of games that mash up roguelite with another genre, which is, hey, this is a different kind of game that we've added sort of roguelike elements to. Yep. So Slay the Spire, famously, is a roguelike that adds a card game. You interact with the game through cards. Loop Hero adds a time loop. Enter the Gungeon is a bullet hell roguelite. Keeper RL is a base management roguelike. Cult of the Lamb, I was talking about it in the beginning of the show, is also a kind of a colony management simulator roguelite. A lot of people consider Dwarf Fortress to be in the roguelite category because while there is an adventure mode that you can go on a very traditional roguelike adventure, the colony simulator, when your colony crashes and burns, it's gone. You can save scum it, but theoretically, it's destroyed.
Fair.
So roguelite is often mashed up with other genres, very, very, very frequently. And roguelike, traditional roguelikes, tend to be a little more purely riffing on Rogue, NetHack, Angband, other older entries in that genre. So with all of that in mind, do you feel like you have a good candidate for what
for
you think
traditional roguelike?
I don't care. Really?
I don't know that I've ever clicked with a traditional roguelike.
Okay, sure.
But as far as roguelites, plenty.
It's almost hard not to. They're so frequently mashed up.
I will say, as far as a proper first encounter, the first time I remember hearing the term being used, was Rogue Legacy.
That was one that didn't make it on my list. Was Rogue Legacy 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Very fun roguelites.
Yeah,
and a very good example of the kind of meta progression that they often include.
Right, and that was when I first started looking into the genre proper to see is this something I can get into, and of course my desire for continued progress and continuity makes it difficult for me to like a traditional roguelike.
Yes.
But on the other hand, I have no issue with things that are like traditional old arcade games that also make you restart all the time. But I think it's the restarting coupled with that kind of rudimentary role playing is what
you do get attached. You're more attached to your Caves
Right.
of Cud character than you are fucking Pac-Man.
Exactly. Yeah,
And every time you boot up Pac-Man's the same from end to end.
Right.
So you don't feel like you're losing any progression. I could see that.
Yeah, I think that's where it kind of hits me. Whereas with a roguelite, I at least have some level of progression.
Yeah.
But also, even the ones that don't have any level of progression in a roguelite, when they are mixed with other genres and everything, it does make it feel a little more arcadey.
Yeah. Yeah. So that brings us to our next section, because I just realized not realized, but remembered you weren't on the previous one of these for how we break it up. So ideally, I would want to try to convince you or whoever's on the show with me to maybe try something.
Okay.
And so I want to overcome these hurdles. So I have a whole section that's called hurdles to overcome. These are what I consider sort of the biggest hurdles to overcome to get into this genre. I'm mostly talking about traditional roguelikes. Okay. But I can't not talk about roguelites because some of the best entries in the traditional roguelike genre kind of bleed into it anyway. Like Caves of Cud has a full-on role-playing mode where death is not permanent. So straight up, that knocks it out of the traditional roguelike category, but it's also the best traditional roguelike that I've played in years.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? Like it feels, and there is a mode where it is permanent. So it's like it becomes a thing where the lines are so blurry. First up is permadeath. Let's talk about it. And it is the first hurdle for people looking to enjoy roguelike to overcome. It can be frustrating, it can be difficult. Even a lot of roguelites, something like Hades, where there is meta progression, but some of your runs, if you have a real bad run, you may not push that meta progression forward at all.
Right. Yeah.
And it feels like wasted time. You're like, fuck, man, I had I spent 20 minutes of my time and my run was so bad, I unlocked nothing new.
Yeah, that's always super frustrating.
And it can be really frustrating. So I think the mindset that helps me, and you kind of already brought us into that space, is considering roguelikes as arcade RPGs.
Yeah.
And this is what I come to them for, because I very often, like I know my reputation I have on the show, but I really love RPGs.
Yeah,
I really do. And
I feel like you make that pretty clear on the show. That you love
I don't know.
Your love of JRPGs is less than your love of RPGs. But
true.
I mean, especially when you factor in like tabletop and stuff, you're a much bigger RPG fan than I am.
But a lot of times I want an RPG. I'm not currently playing one, but I want to be in it now. I don't want to sit through the first 10 hours of a 150-hour Persona game. I don't want to have to sit down and learn how this MMO works to actually build a character that's not a piece of shit and play it. I don't want to have to relearn all the controls for this old CRPG or whatever. And so I can get all of the fun and crunch that comes with a lengthy RPG experience kind of condensed down into a 10 to 30 minute run without having to sit through cutscenes or story elements or preamble or watching a YouTube video because it's a character builder and I don't want to mess it up really bad. I can just kind of jump in and no strings attached, as long as I've learned how this game works before in my life.
Right.
Get a new character, new experience, new story, and a new environment that's procedurally generated, creating new stuff without having any preamble. So it's very much the same thing you might come to an arcade game for.
Yeah.
Where you're like, hey, I just want to sit down. I got 30 minutes to play, but I don't always feel like playing an arcade game. I want something that, like, I want an RPG. I want to, the real RPG experience.
It's fair.
I do feel like getting into character builds can help here as well. For games that support it, things like most recently Caves of Cud, but a lot of them will let you kind of customize different character things. Like Tales of Maj'Al has pretty extensive character classes that slowly unlock as you play. So as you're playing, you're like, oh, my ranger I was playing died, but I just unlocked a dwarf, arcane berserker. What the hell is that? I want to check that out, right? So kind of getting into different classes and character builds can help here, since you can be asking yourself what you want to do differently with your next character instead of being locked into like 60 hours of early game mistakes, which is one of the problems that, hurdles that RPGs in general have, which is
true.
Except for games that let you fully respec, which thankfully is kind of becoming a thing, but also not always.
Yeah, it's becoming a little more common.
And I'm also famous for locking myself into shitty situations in RPGs. Ones that Saturn didn't even think you could do it in.
Yes. Yeah, so you do have a talent at that.
And I wonder how much of it comes from me playing a lot of roguelikes. And in a roguelike, there will sometimes be situations where I'm like, look, I can tell by the way this run is going, I'm not going to beat this. Let's take some risks and do some weird stuff and see if I can learn something from it. And I'll lock myself in a no-win situation and die because I already saw the writing on the wall and I want it to be a useful run.
Right.
And I think sometimes I take those same risks in things like JRPGs where I only have one save file. But I do think getting into builds and thinking about what you want to do with your next character and letting how you're playing inform your next character can kind of take the sting out of death a little bit.
Yeah.
Because by the time it happens, you're already like, all right, well, this is what I'm going to do now. Now that didn't work out. This isn't going well. Next time, I'm going to do this thing. Definitely. And so that helps me a lot.
That's fair.
Death by RNG is a really tough hurdle to overcome.
Yep.
To quote Picard, there are times where you make every correct decision and you still lose, right? Your character build is sound. You're playing the game correctly. You've made nothing but correct choices, and you still die.
Yeah, I hate that so much.
Sometimes it's because of an element of the game you didn't understand, which we're going to get to in a moment. Other times it's because the game generated a level filled with 50 dragons.
Yeah, sometimes it's just hateful.
So hopefully procedural generation, the idea of procedural generation, which is different than random generation, it's not random, right?
Right.
Procedural generation tries to avoid these like unfair beatdown levels, but it is the nature of random number generation that sometimes something will be within the operational parameters, but still be an unfair situation that maybe the developers either didn't think of or just literally haven't encountered.
Right.
Like I was reading, I forget the name of the game, so I can't say it, but I was reading the early access notes for a roguelike, a traditional roguelike earlier today, and they were saying like, hey, we need a bunch of people testing the game. That's why we're in early access, because there's so many possible permutations that there's no way we've programmed our procedural generation to properly account for everything. So we need you to play it and be like, hey, this made a level with 50 dragons. And then we can go, oh, we need to figure out how to make it so that it doesn't do that. That's not fair. But sometimes it just happens, you know. Yeah. It just does.
Sometimes it feels intentional.
It's hard not to feel some intentionality from the game where you're like, fuck you, game.
Yep.
And as someone who plays a ton of tabletop RPGs, which are very dice driven, so like in the real world, when you're rolling dice at a table, you would assume that anyone would go, well, you know, there's no way the game hates me. They're literally dice rolling in front of me. I can see that this is truly random.
Now, there is a way the DM hates you.
Sure, yeah. But it is the nature of the human brain that we're going to invent these patterns. And when it's a dice on a table, you can convince yourself of, hey, this is just random. But when you
can't the DM make the dice a little bit nicer and just be like, all right, well, you rolled bad, but I'm not going to make that mean absolute death, just a really bad situation.
Sure, but you as a player know that punch was pulled, right? You rolled the die, you saw it, you knew the stakes, and then the GM goes, yeah, we're going to change that, which is the upside to having a judge at a table.
Yeah, I feel like the judge in some of these roguelikes is particularly bad, though.
Well, also because you don't see the numbers going on behind the scene. You don't see the generation, so you're just staring at a black box, so you're more prone to creating these patterns in your head, right?
Oh, yeah.
My final major hurdle here is interface. Traditional roguelikes are known for having weird interfaces. Like NetHack is just ASCII. It runs at a command line.
It's intentionally obtuse at this point.
Anyone who's ever seen a game of NetHack knows that until you learn the game, it's like looking at the Matrix. It's that fucking scene where that guy's like, I see a woman in a red dress. And I'm like, I see an orc and 15 goblins. And you're like, that's an @ symbol and some curly braces. What are you talking about?
Right.
Even more modern traditional roguelikes, such as Caves of Cud or Tangle Deep, have small to moderate learning curves. And you will die early on many times because you misunderstood some interface option.
Yeah.
You will also die after having played the game for 100 hours because you've been misunderstanding an interface option the entire time and you didn't realize it. And it's just kind of part of the journey. Maybe that's just part of my journey. Maybe some people out there, before they jump into a roguelike, they're like, no, I'm going to watch 300 hours of tutorials and read all the manuals. And if that's you, great. This won't be a hurdle for you. But I feel like most people just want to play a game and they'll do the minimum amount they need to get into a game playing it. So yeah, interface can be a hurdle. It's one of those things. It depends on the game. It varies by game. Like Caves of Cud, as a very recent modern success story in the genre, is pretty good about onboarding, but it's still a little weird, and I'm still learning the interface many hours in. And there's still stuff that I'm figuring out and going, oh, I had that wrong. I was doing it wrong the whole time. So those are kind of the big hurdles that I feel the genre brings to the table: permadeath, death by RNG, and interface. I want to talk about why it's worth overcoming these. Because I don't want to be that person in these Learning to Love episodes. It's like, well, you shouldn't let those bother you. They bother me too. It's really frustrating to me when I'm playing a character and I'm like, oh man, I love this character. I was doing so good. And I hit the 50 dragon level and I fucking die. And I'm like, man, that sucks. For some games like Tales of Maj'Al, Tome, you can just regenerate. You talk to the god and you go, I want to go back. And they go, all right, we'll send you back. You can try again, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe you're playing with Tangle Deep with permadeath turned off and you don't got to worry about it. But I a lot of these games are designed around permadeath being a part of it. Yeah. Like in Tangle Deep, you're constantly unlocking new classes, and if you don't die, you don't get to see the new things you've unlocked to experience them.
Yeah, and there are games that I have been able to push past it, and other games where I absolutely cannot.
Yeah.
I don't think it would technically be considered a roguelike, but it might be a roguelite, Spelunky.
Yeah, Spelunky is the only reason I don't
really unlock anything.
No, the only reason
you unlock skins.
Yeah, but the only reason I would not include it is because it's not really an RPG.
Right? Yeah, it's more of a platform adventure.
But it's in that space.
Yeah, it has that mindset, I guess.
Yeah.
But I was able to get past it in Spelunky because it did feel arcadey enough.
Yeah.
It did feel like something you could just pick up, play for a little bit, not get attached to your character, and then move on.
Yeah, for sure. I want to talk about why these things are worth overcoming. So this is part of the episode where I just get to gush, which is why it's worth getting past this stuff for me.
This is the part where I get to tell you how wrong you are about everything.
Sure. I mean, at any point. First up is emergent story. Sometimes the story of what happens when you just kind of smash random procedural things together is funnier and more compelling and more interesting than anything a writer could have come up with.
Fair.
And some of ask anyone who's ever played a tabletop role-playing game. The stories they have are almost never, our dungeon master prepared this plot for us and their plot was so good. It's always, we had nailed ourselves into a closet to hope that the big bad guy wouldn't find us, but we forgot that he could sense us with his psychic powers, so we used a pick to try to tunnel out of there, and we accidentally tunneled into a goblin cave. Like, these are the stories that are funny. And
then Andrew convinced the DM that his fart powers should be able to distract the goblins.
So, I love emergent story. Another great example of emergent story and how powerful it can be is something like Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
I heard hundreds of stories about funny things happening in Breath of the Wild. None of them were the actual plot.
Right, yeah.
No one ever talked. The game has a plot, in case you didn't know. No one ever talks about that. They're like, I built a catapult out of these 3 different things and I magneted them together and I rocketed across. Like, that's what people like.
I rolled a bomb into whatever. Yeah.
And so I love emergent story. I also love the story of my character, and I love stories where I get to see the entire story, and I get to experience the entire life of my adventurer from the beginning of them setting off to their untimely demise, and that's comforting for me. And I know this is kind of a weird one, but like when I play an RPG and I get to the end and it's like, okay, your 17-year-old protagonist in this JRPG has now saved the world. And I'm like, great, what are they doing with their remaining, statistically 60 some odd years? What happens next?
Teaching algebra.
Like I feel like I'm like, no, I'm
tired now.
I want to know where they went from here. What happened after that?
Sometimes there's a sequel that'll tell you, though.
Sometimes, true.
Yeah.
And so I like the idea of my adventurer's entire life playing out. I get to see all of it. It's a short life, but I get to be there. So I get to see their journey from end to end. And like, that's a cool thing to me. And it's a thing I think I take from tabletop role-playing games. Because anyone will tell you that's played D&D long enough, at first you don't want your characters to die. But over time you realize that there's only 2 things that can happen to a character, right? They either die in the game and there's a cool story, or eventually you just get bored of them and they sit on a shelf never to come out again, and they die that way. And that's the only real sad death to me,
Well, you just assume that it's a happy retirement.
But it's not. They didn't happily retire. I mean, I guess the GM could be like, yes, they happily retire. But more than likely, what happened was your game fell apart before the GM said, now they all happily retire. So they didn't. They just now, I have so many characters in a folder on my shelf that just...
Is there not just a conclusion to the story you can reach?
I mean, you could, I guess, but most tabletop RPG sessions fall apart because of scheduling. So it's not like you're like, we have reached the end of the campaign. Thank you for playing. Your characters are all retired now. Sometimes that happens, but 99% of games that stop and characters that stop getting played is because people got bored of them or scheduling fell apart. And so it doesn't ever actually happen, right? You don't ever actually sit down at that table with those same people ever again. because you're like, you can't. If you could, you would, and you'd keep playing, but you can't, so you don't. And so now Justarius the Dark has been sitting in a folder on my shelf since I was 17, and he'll never see the end of his story.
Well, yeah, he kind of earned that with that name, though.
I was a kid, Saturn. The other thing is, and this is kind of hyperbolic, but it's in other ways it's kind of true, is infinite content. With procedurally generated levels and worlds, there's always something new and exciting to explore. You never have to get bored of the starting area that you've played 100 times, or have to resort to a randomizer to inject new excitement into something you've played to death. It's always rearranging itself in front of you. It's like Cube 2 Hypercube in that way. And so it's really nice.
That's not selling me there.
It's really nice to have something that's always presenting you with new content, and even when you're starting from the beginning, it's different, right?
Yeah.
I mentioned it before, snack-sized gaming. I often find myself trapped between wanting something nice and crunchy to sink my teeth into, but also wanting to be done within an hour, and roguelikes kind of give me both. If you're a cheapskate, then the traditional roguelike genre has a huge library of games that are either cheap or free. Roguelikes are known for being pretty affordably priced, often free, made by individuals or small teams, so you get to support indie developers.
Well, if you're getting it for free, you're not supporting them.
I mean, you can support them
emotionally
with downloads, with bug reports, with engaging with the community. You can also probably donate money to them. You know, there are a lot of ways. There are a lot of kinds of support. I would say that people that listen to this show, even if they don't give us money, are supporting us in a way.
True. Yeah,
you know. So it's it's a ton of value for very little or no money.
Fair.
Adding on to that, a lot of them are also open source. So in addition to supporting open source development potentially, or at least spreading the word of it, they can also be a great way to play around with and learn programming. Most of my time spent learning C was programming a roguelike. I was making a roguelike called Alter, and we worked on it for like 9 months.
Yeah.
And it's if you're into that, if you're in that space, it's a really good way to do that. That's fun, and you don't have to deal with graphics all the time. And this is one that I was listening to an interview with the Caves of Cud team on a different podcast, and they mentioned this, and I had never really thought about it because I was writing my notes, and I was like, man, really, all traditional roguelikes are made by like small indie teams. That's weird. Yeah. And I forget which one of they had a couple of people from the Caves of Cud team on, and one of them said that it's the oldest genre that has never really been a part of the mainstream games industry ever. I get, unless you count roguelites, which again are kind of a different genre.
Right.
But the idea of experiencing one of the oldest genres that's never, traditional roguelikes have never, I can't think of a single example of a traditional roguelike that I would call part of the mainstream gaming industry at any point in history.
That's true, yeah.
And so you can be that annoying guy at parties that likes niche things. Right?
I don't know if that's a selling point.
It's a selling point. People want to be that guy. Okay.
I will. Most of these I agree with, but I still, as the person you're trying to convince, I will still push back against the first one because I've said on the show before that one of my big complaints about a lot of Western RPGs, which bleeds over into this, is I hate having to create my character. I don't want to write the story. I want the story written and presented to me in a complete form.
Well, the story is written and presented to you in complete form. But now, you might have to pick a character class, but you could just pick the first option, and it's as valid as any other option.
Yeah, I want the definitive option.
It is the definitive option.
And it's not.
If
I'm making choices, then it's no longer definitive.
Because all of the options are definitive. By definition, if no option is technically better than the other option, then any option is definitive.
That's when I start to fall off, though.
It's like a job system JRPGs. Like any class you pick is the right class.
The correct classes, all of them at once by the end.
Sure.
By the time I have finished 100% of the content on one save file, that's when I am done.
And there are games in the genre that accommodate people that are like, I don't want to build anything. I don't want to have to decide anything. I mean, games are a series. That's what the definition of a game is, a series of decisions when you really get right down to it. So they're going to have decisions. But there are ones where you just go. Like, we talked about Spelunky, and I still struggle to really include it. But in Spelunky, you just are the Spelunky guy, whatever his name is.
Spelunker.
Spelunker.
Well,
and
that can't be his name. That's a different game.
Yeah, that's true. There's a legally distinct Spelunker is his name. Even if you want to include stuff like La Mulana, which if we're including Spelunky, La Mulana's got to be in the roguelite category somewhere.
Yeah.
But then that also sort of bleeds into search action a little bit, which I feel like roguelite often impedes on anyway.
Sometimes, yeah.
But getting back to more traditional roguelikes, I think if it's a verisimilitude thing, right? Yeah. And so it's and I see it a lot with people that are like, I don't want to, because I run into people like you that are like, I want you to tell me the story. I don't want to have to decide any of it. I want to get the correct version of the story, in air quotes, correct version of the story. And I get that, and it's a verisimilitude thing. It's like, how much do I or don't I believe that this is the story?
Right.
And I think, again, this is a little bit of tabletop gaming bleeding over, which is that your game master doesn't have a story. Their job is to make you think they do, but they never do. Even if they wrote one down, you decided to go left and they wanted you to go right? And so I think, it requires a mindset change, I think, to get over the idea of emergent story being the only story that exists. But also some of the games, like Caves of Cud is a good example of this. When you make the game, there is a story. There's a specific story to this world, this time that it was made, with hundreds of years of history, with locations tied to that. Like, it exists, right, in its own discrete form, in slightly less random format than in earlier iterations of traditional roguelikes. So that it is there to be found. The serial numbers are all swapped around as part of procedural generation.
Right.
And you do have to pick your character from a list of like 5 characters. But they also, in the thing, will tell you like, this is so let me sell you on this. In Caves of Cud, there is a tutorial. In the tutorial, character they start you with is fixed. And they consider it, because when you go to pick a character, it'll tell you survivability. It's basically like, how beginner friendly are these different characters? Yeah. You could make the argument that technically the tutorial character is the default Caves of Cud character, because it is forced upon you when you play the tutorial. And when you go to make a character, it says, do you want to make it from scratch or pick it off a list? If you go to pick it off a list, it's the one listed as most survivable.
I have been framing this whole episode in the scope of Caves of Cud, because I keep seeing it recommended everywhere the last few weeks.
Yeah.
So I've been framing this whole thing in, are you selling me on it? So I appreciate that.
I will say this about Caves of Cud specifically, and we're about to get to general tips.
Yeah.
For Caves of Cud, if you like just really weird shit, really weird, and you don't mind putting in some work to get to the weird, nothing else is as weird as this fucking shit. Like, in this is a game where you can use future tech to animate a wall and become friends with it, and then it becomes a cult leader, and then you can like get a fungal infection in your arm and cut your own arm off and then animate it and make friends with it. Like, it's just fucking weird.
Nice.
I want to talk general tips. And these are not to any specific game. They're super broad. But just for traditional roguelikes in general. And this is the hardest one for me up front, is stop and look at things. Because sometimes you'll be in the middle of a level and you'll be trucking along and you'll start running into obstacles. And the thing about traditional roguelikes is they're turn-based. The game doesn't move until you move. But you get in the habit of running around doing stuff. Right. And every time you move, the world takes a turn.
You start to feel comfortable with your character and think that you can just move.
And you start sprinting through shit.
Yeah.
If your game has an auto-explore option, use it. Caves of Cud has a great auto-explore option where I hit the button and my guy will explore until he sees something like an enemy or something of note, and then he'll stop and say, hey, I see this thing. What do you want me to do? Which is a really nice way to not just be holding the over button and running into bad guys and dying.
Right.
It's also easy to, when a lot of shit starts going bad, to get nervous and start taking moves really quickly to try to get away or do something. And this can be a death sentence. Stop moving. Use the various look commands to look at the things on screen, really understand them. If you're in a tough spot and you're in a permadeath mode and you're like, hey, I I want to keep playing this character, but I don't know how to get out of this. Take a screenshot, post it in one of these communities and say, hey, this is where I am. This is my inventory. Man, how do I get out of this? It's very, in the NetHack community, all the time, people would share screenshots of their NetHack game and be like, what do I do here?
Yeah.
And sometimes the answer is drink those random unidentified potions because maybe one of them will help you because that's really all you got.
Right.
But stopping and looking at things and remembering that the game only moves when you move is really easy to forget in the heat of the moment.
Fair.
I will also say, learn the game. Before you really dig into a new roguelike, a traditional roguelike, let your first session be session 0, where you just read, or if the game has it, play the tutorial or watch a video on how to deal with the interface.
And
this
expect
helps
to lose the first time. And,
yeah,
and enjoy
expect
the
to
journey.
lose the first few times.
Yeah.
Roguelikes have few, if any, safeties.
Yeah.
They will let you make a dud character. They will let you do stupid shit. They will let you light yourself on fire. They will let you throw yourself off of cliffs. There are no guardrails in these games.
Right.
So learn how the game works. Just again, I call it session 0, which is again taken from tabletop gaming. Your first session is like, all right, my first half hour, I'm just learning how to play. You don't need to learn everything. Just learn the basics. Share your stories is a big one for me. Roguelikes are mostly single player affairs. When you have a really cool run or a funny death, share it with someone. This emergent story only exists for you. You are the only person that will ever get to experience this story. So pop in our Discord. Tell me what happened to your Caves of Cud character who had 6 limbs and one of them became sentient and started punching him to death or whatever. I want to hear about that. Because otherwise, no one else gets to know about your story. And that could be a lot of the fun. And finally, try lots of games. Since so many traditional roguelikes are free, there's really no reason you can't kind of try them all. Some of them will just never click with you. Like, I've never clicked with Angband. It's one of the most classic traditional roguelikes of the genre. I've never enjoyed it. I'm not even sure why. I just don't like it. Many of these, the ones that aren't available for free, if you wait for a Steam sale, you can pick up large handfuls of them for a couple bucks most of the time. They're very often very cheap, and even at full price, it's rare to see them over $20. So there's really no reason not to try lots and lots of them. Also on Steam, you can return games if you don't like them. So you can just go, I bought Caves of Cud, I bought Rift Wizard, I bought Jupiter Hell, I didn't like it. Well, just get your money back. It's fine. Like, you're gonna know most of what the game is within the first couple hours, especially on a roguelike. It's not Persona. You're not waiting for hour 90 for it to click. Like, you're either gonna think this is weird and worth figuring out or not. Like, that's it. Which brings us finally to starting recommendations. In the traditional roguelike camp, I will always and forever recommend NetHack because it will run on even computers that aren't graphically capable. It is a steep learning curve, but 1, it's extremely classic. 2, it's free and open source. And 3, you literally don't need graphics to. It runs in ASCII. You could run it on a teletype if you had the technology. I will also recommend Angband. I don't personally like it. A lot of people I've run into like Angband or NetHack and not the other one. So if you try one and you don't like it, try the other one. Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup is a very traditional one that is available for free. The Windows version has graphics. It has a tile set, kind of by default in the Windows version. So it's a little easier for people who are like, I cannot learn to look at a bunch of fucking matrix digits to play my video game. I'm not going to do that. I need tile sets. There's ways to get tiles for these games, but Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup on Windows just comes with it in the package.
That's something.
For modern roguelikes, I would highly recommend Tangle Deep. Again, I keep being fuzzy about the exact genre definition of this one.
Yeah.
Because it has it's the biggest accessibility menu I've ever seen. It's not just invincibility or not. You can really tweak every aspect of the game. Yeah. It has meta progression. It has animal companions. It's got mini games. But then when you're in the dungeon, it's very much a traditional grid-based, turn-based roguelike. And it's a lot of fun, a lot of classes to unlock. You can turn off permadeath, all kinds of stuff. Yeah. Tales of Maj'Eyal, often shortened to Tome, is a really fun traditional roguelike that has some accessibility options, huge amounts of character classes. It's got an online mode, so there's a free version of the game, there's a paid version of the game on Steam that includes some more features. There's like an online chat, it's like a general chat for the game. So the game's not online, but you can chat with other people playing the game in the game, like it's an MMO, which is pretty cool. And it also has an overworld. A lot of these games are just you're in the dungeon. You start like NetHack, you start in the dungeon. Welcome to the dungeon. The whole game is the dungeon. When you're out of the dungeon, it's because you either won or quit playing the game.
Right.
This has a full overworld.
Nice.
Similarly, Caves of Cud also has an overworld, and Caves of Cud is also just so fucking weird. I've heard it compared to Gamma World. I've heard it compared to Dune. I've heard it compared to all sorts of shit. It's very weird sci-fi, fantasy, strangeness. It's really fun. There's kind of nothing else like it right now that I can think of or that I've found. If you're like, hey, I don't want to do traditional fantasy. I don't like that. Caves of Cud is bizarre as shit.
Nice.
If you really want something a little more sci-fi, a little more actiony, Jupiter Hell, which is kind of originally based on Doom RL, which was a Doom-based roguelike, which is also getting a demake that is supposed to be more like the original Doom RL. Jupiter Hell is a really fun roguelike. I would highly recommend, where you're a space marine killing demons with a shotgun, but it's still grid-based, turn-based. For roguelites, I don't really want to make a lot of recommendations here because, first of all, what I really want to sell people on is traditional roguelikes, but also some of the most celebrated indie games in the last 15 years have been roguelites.
True.
Your Hades, your Dead Cells, Enter the Gungeon, Slay the Spire, they've all released to wide praise and critical acclaim, so you don't need me to tell you which ones of these to buy. But I will go to bat for Mystery Dungeon games in general, which are very much just kind of traditional roguelikes with a little bit of progression and some accessibility built in.
And some like character flavor.
Yeah, a little flavor. They're also really great if you love JRPG aesthetics and you want to kind of dip your toe into the roguelike arena and be like, hey, how do I feel about this? Shiren, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Etrian Mystery Dungeon, the Tornico games, there's Chocobo Mystery Dungeon.
Yep.
All very much in this arena, right? And so if you're like, no, I gotta have my JRPG aesthetic, then here you go. It exists here too. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Before we give final thoughts, I want to give 2 resources. First is, this is from 2015, but someone made a collection of 700 roguelikes from various places, all collected into one big archive. There's no piracy here as far as I can tell. These are all free games collected from various sources. Being 10 years old now, obviously it's very dated.
Yeah.
But if you're like me and you kind of like just downloading a gargantuan archive of shit to just sort of crawl through ad hoc offline, and you're insane in that same way that I'm insane.
That is pretty insane, yeah.
Then it's really fun to just kind of wander through this file structure and find shit. 20% of it doesn't even work. Some of it's alpha builds, and then you run into something, you're like, oh my God, this is so much fun. If you just like that raw discovery, the Roguelike Mega Collection, it's on archive.org. Just search Roguelike Mega Collection 2015 and you'll find it. Nice. There's also a traditional roguelike website called roguebasin.com. It has a list of over 1,200 individual games. It has a link to the Roguelikes Discord. If you're like, no, I really want to get in deep in the like super hyper traditional roguelike area, then Rogue Basin is a great resource.
Nice.
If you're wanting to keep it pretty light and breezy, honestly, start crawling around on Steam. There's a lot of shit there, and the traditional roguelike tag is very useful. The roguelite tag is very unuseful. But that's because it's an unuseful genre designation.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as final thoughts, I love roguelikes. In the games I played this week, I would put Darkest Dungeon, Cult of the Lamb, both of those staunchly in the kind of roguelite category.
Yeah.
I talked about it previously. I'm still playing and enjoying the 1.0 release of Caves of Cud. I still fire up NetHack from time to time. I'll get a wild hair and be like, I want to go play an orc because they can't be poisoned, so I can eat the corpses of everyone that I kill and never get sick and never run out of food. That's so exciting. It'll let me do that. And so I really love this genre. and honestly, since some of the most famous examples in this genre are literally free, there's kind of no excuse to not try one. Again, possibly the oldest genre ever that has never been in the gaming mainstream. Never. Well, I would love to see what a AAA traditional roguelike would look like. Maybe I wouldn't. I take that back.
Yeah,
Forget that.
That feels like it's a recipe for disaster.
But yeah, there's a lot of really great stuff here. And there's so much of it worth checking out. There's more game than you can ever play in your entire life, and every time you sit down to play it, it will be something new. I mean, how is that not the ultimate sales pitch? That's it. I think I've said enough.
I'm still not 100% sold, just because
Sure.
I like the more refined, less randomly generated thing, but I still have a lot of love for plenty of the roguelites.
Totally. Slay the Spire, I know you liked. Balatro, I know you liked. Sounds like Cards might be the secret unlock. I know you liked.
Also, I've enjoyed the Mystery Dungeon games. I enjoyed Hades.
Totally.
But I have been eyeing Caves of Cud just because of how much attention it's gotten lately, and it almost makes me want to try it, but the price is just a touch too high for me at this point.
Yeah, it's like $20, I think. Is
30.
It $20? $30. Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is a touch high.
Yeah.
I would be intensely interested to see how you find it, because it is like, it has accessibility options, but at its core, it's very traditional roguelike. So I would be really interested to see how you found it.
It's one of those things that, like, when it goes on sale, I might give it a shot just to try it, because I'm not opposed to just the session based game where it's just a restarts every time.
Yeah. One thing I really like that Cud does is it has a daily seed. So every day it's like you can play the daily. Slay the Spire did the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun.
With the Zelda randomizer for a while there.
Yeah, we're like, hey, everyone in the community is playing this daily seed, and it's kind of cool and interesting. So that for a few days there, that was my favorite way to play Cud.
Nice.
And then I ended up discovering Esper builds, and I convinced a guy to join my group so I could have a party, but I didn't know that he was a cult leader, so his whole cult joined me, and then I did it again, and then I ended up with a posse of like 24 people. And I was killing things with magical spells from so far away that I actually couldn't see them on the screen.
Nice.
And so that's how I've been playing now. But yeah, I would be really interested to see how you found something like Cud that is very traditional. Although, again, I get the trepidation. It's $30, which is $30 more than a lot of traditional roguelikes.
Right.
And so that's a hard sell in and of itself.
Yeah.
But it's not a hard sell, Saturn.
I have a feeling you're going to segue into something.
It's our Patreon. At patreon.com/Retro Warriors, how could you avoid a 30-minute pre-show of us talking about cookies? How could you possibly not want to hear me and Andrew talking about piss on Talking Wizards for 45 minutes? How is this not something you want to give us money for? I don't understand. Learning to love our Patreon. Well, it kind of is.
It's not always exclusively piss.
That's true. We talk about shit a lot.
Yeah, there you go.
I think we every episode now we just are kind of counting the minutes until we start talking about poop.
Yeah.
That's I think where we've landed.
I don't see where the problem is.
You can also get Read Along, which is a very fun show that we don't advertise enough. And you can hang out with us live and read a magazine with us. Yeah. Doesn't that sound fun? Reading a magazine with some random old dudes off the internet? Sounds great, right?
You know what? These old magazines are they are a snapshot in time.
They are buck wild.
Yeah.
Some of the shit we see in them, I'm like, holy fucking crap. Did they really publish a 12-year-old's direct email address in this letters section? You can't do that.
That part doesn't get me, probably because I remember living through that era. But the part that gets me is how some of these advertisements have aged so poorly.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is shit that marketing teams signed off on. And we're like, this is going to sell things. And when we look at it now, we're like, oh, no.
What's that Neo Geo one where it's like, he doesn't touch me anymore? And it's like a woman in lingerie and a guy playing Neo Geo standing up in a full business attire with suspenders.
There's also Game Boy and Game Gear ads that go basically that exact same direction.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, we want to thank the following patrons for their kind donations. starting with Ross.
And an ice climber enthusiast.
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Sharp cheddar.
Burger Champ.
B-Rad 1978.
Chronolingua.
Mouse Cop.
Viable patron Metroid Prime.
And Neil Hayes.
All gave us money to talk about piss.
Only briefly about piss. We talked more about cookies today.
Yeah, well, today was cookies. The last Talking Wizards was, now people are gonna like tag me when they're like, hey, you didn't talk about piss very much and you really sold up the piss angle.
Yeah.
And there was not much piss talk. And now I'm struggling to remember when we did talk about piss.
They only paid you and Andrew to talk about piss. They didn't pay me to talk about piss, so I don't have to.
There's a tabletop role-playing game that I keep wanting to run called Piss Wizards Against Capitalism.
Okay.
And I don't know anything about it other than it's called Piss Wizards Against Capitalism. And so that makes me want to, I don't care really what it's about anymore. I just want to be a piss wizard and be against capitalism at a tabletop role-playing session. That sounds amazing. Anyway, thank you for listening. We'll be back next week. And as always, let us cling together.